All right, let's go to the money desk. Devan Murugan joins us. Hi, Devan. So, in fact, we just heard the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, speaking at the African, I keep forgetting the name, the Business Forum on the African Free Trade Area. Is it a big opportunity? Is there lots that's come out of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, here's an agreement to an area that actually says, well, look, we've got to drop the barriers down so that economies across Africa can do intra-trade instead of trading intensively with the rest of the globe. And perhaps two-day gathering and meeting are not only keen, but will have material benefit from this proposed trade area. What are they feeling?
Devan, firstly, thanks very much for having me on. The mood that I read in the room, both from South African and from African business people, was one of, I guess, cautious optimism.
Yep.
I think the concept of a free trade area and what it sets out to achieve, aggregating volumes, giving you scale and size so you can start competing with the likes of China and India, certainly in terms of population and the likes thereof, that all makes a lot of sense, and it does provide an industrialization opportunity, as you put it, in certain sectors only, of course, but it would benefit the continent if we can get all of this together. So I think the cautious bit of it, so that's the optimism, but the cautious bit is, do we have the capacity on the continent to convert the political will into executionable and implementable business arrangements? And I think that's where there's significant requirement for focus and emphasis moving forward. So in my sector in particular, I think it's well known and well rehearsed out there that Africa could not acquire vaccines at the time of the COVID pandemic. And it could not do so because we couldn't aggregate our volumes and start competing with other continents. So this presents that opportunity, but the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding in this instance is building probably digital platforms that will cohere demand and supply, aggregate volumes, and allow intra-trade across 54 different jurisdictions. So that, for me, is where the emphasis needs to be placed moving forward.
Yeah. Let's talk about that caution a little bit in detail here, right? The question of dropping all forms of barriers comes with this reservation, doesn't it, Stavros? I mean, just to point out one structural barrier, road infrastructure. The backlogs at ports are one of them. So, I mean, if you have that political will, as you put it, it could go a long way to clear that up. And surely there are businesses out there that want to get their product from South Africa to other countries and vice versa, but you do have these structural constraints.
Yeah, you're correct. So I think they're both what I would term barriers and non-tariff barriers that would hinder this. They're certainly not insurmountable. And I don't want to diminish or minimize the opportunity that exists here, because it is a real opportunity. However, our continent at this point in time is very poorly interconnected. So if I had to fly to West Africa, for example, I'm more likely to get a flight from Joburg flying to Europe, and then probably from Paris into West Africa. Now that doesn't lend itself to the type of trade, intracontinental trade, that we're aiming for here. So there's going to have to be significant focus also placed on logistics, supply chain, and just the travel interconnectivity across the continent.
And I suppose maybe my next point illustrates what you're saying here. Like some countries, industrialized countries like South Africa, importing tons of soy from Brazil, for example, when it can get this in African countries. But I would imagine part of the reason is exactly just that. Logistically, to do that trade probably just ends up a bit more easier and cheaper doing that the other way around, which is really not the aim of this free trade area, is it?
Well, it is and it isn't. I think, constraints can always be turned into opportunities, and I'd like to err on the side of opportunity here, because if we are able to start aggregating these volumes, as I said, and this is the trick when you've got 54 fragmented deaggregated markets, you're not going to get any type of economies of scale, and that applies to the logistics connectivity as well on the continent.
Yep.
I think if you start aggregating and getting pooled procurement, certainly for pharma, that's where we're seeing, for pharmaceuticals, we're seeing that as a big opportunity, because if you're able to start pooling procurement on the continent and start procuring from the continent for the continent, that presents a tremendous opportunity. So aggregating these volumes will also play a big part in how you sort out the logistics and supply chain, given the geographic diversity of the continent. So I think that constraint can be turned into opportunity, but it's having the capacity, of course, and the cohesion to do all of this. It's not an easy thing to do, but not insurmountable. But the opportunity is vast, and I think that's where we need to look at, is the vast opportunity that exists for many, many sectors on the continent if we pull this off.
Yeah, just very quickly on that point as we end off, Stavros. I mean, after this 2 days of meetings, do you get a sense that there is some coalition, if you like, some reasoning between the political will that you speak about and perhaps in some areas the lack of, and the potential of business to actually get their products across borders? After this 2-day meetings, do you get a sense that those business leaders at that conference and the political leaders are getting somewhere on that?
I think there's a realization, both in our own country and on the African continent, that to pull off any of these ambitious economic plans, free trade areas, industrialization projects, whatever it might be, it requires a careful coordination and collaboration between the private and the public sectors. And the political will that I spoke about earlier, that seems to have infused throughout the conference. But now we need the private sector working together with government to remove any bottlenecks, constraints, etc., so that we can start executing on these plans. I think we are very good at putting plans together, and I don't mean this facetiously in any way, but the trick of any plan is, are you able to execute on that plan? And that's what we need to focus on. I feel if we can start executing and getting a couple of quick wins in a few sectors, a few of the targeted sectors, of which, of course, pharmaceuticals is one, then I think we will build up a significant momentum both across private and public sector. But the two sectors need each other in this instance, and need to work closely together. And I saw some of that infusing through the conference earlier today.
All right, Stavros Nicalaou, thanks very much indeed for talking to a senior executive for strategic trade at Aspen. All right, quick look to see what's been happening on the markets. Well, we've had, 0.75% up in the green. The main driver on our local market this afternoon is that mining companies did exceptionally well, between 9 and 11% for some of the big mining giants. And of course, some of the drivers that are coming up from that is the fact that China's economic growth numbers better than expected. And of course, it's the world's second largest economy, so it really gave a boost to some of those mining companies.